Everybody read it? Carlill and Carbolic Smokeball. So this is a foundation case. It's a Court of Appeal case. It's in your case book, 1893. Not exactly a young chicken. On the side there I've got some examples of some of the advertisements that were in newspapers all over London about the Carbolic Smokeball. So the Carbolic Smokeball, that's what it looked like. I don't know, I always imagine it's a little snuff pot or something. It's got something in it, and they advertise that it positively cures and prevents influenza. Now, in the 1880s, there was a massive Spanish flu epidemic. Millions of people across Europe died. People were genuinely afraid of getting the flu. And so this not inexpensive device, I assume there were probably others like it, were being touted around as a way to avoid this terrible illness. And essentially it said you need to buy this, you need to use it in accordance with the instructions, and you will not get the flu. So basically, one of the things that the advertisement said is that they were so confident of the benefits of their product that they would pay £100 to any person who contracted the flu if they used the product in accordance with the instructions on the packet. In fact, they went so far as to show their sincerity by including in the advertisements a note that £1,000 had been deposited with the bank. So they demonstrated they could fund this. Sounds a bit like a product liability case to me, but it was 1893, so that wasn't available to them. Mrs. Carlill used the Smokeball in accordance with the instructions on the box, but she got the flu. So she brought an action for her £100 because they didn't pay it to her. Are we agreed on the facts? Have a look at the advertisement. Bit hard to read there, but the words are £100 reward will be paid by the Carbolic Smokeball Company to any person who contracts the increasing epidemic influenza, colds or any disease caused by taking cold after having used the ball 3 times daily for 2 weeks in accordance with the printed directions supplied with each ball. £1,000 is deposited with the Alliance Bank, Regent Street, shewing our sincerity in the matter. Does that feel like a promise? At the same time, does taking a drug or a medicine of some sort in exchange for a promise that you will either stay well or get cash, does that sound like a contract to you? Okay, lots of people nodding their head. I'm not sure if it does. To me, I'm not sure when I go and get my butter menthols at the beginning of each winter. And I'm happy to suck on them 4 times a day. I really like butter menthol, but I'm not surprised when I get flu. I got the flu this year after having my flu vaccine too. Oh, so unwell. Anyway, so basically the issues here are, part of the issue is this a contract at all? And actually today, to be quite frank, if we had these facts today, contract law is not the first place that I'd be advising Mrs. Carlill to go. I'd be marching her off probably the pharmaceutical board, to start off with, probably talking to the ACCC about false advertising. We would have a whole heap of statutory remedies in between. At the time, the law of tort was not moving particularly well, or particularly fast, so the decision was made to bring this action in contract. To me, this feels more like a tort. Misleading and deceptive conduct, product liability, really. So if she got sick, there should be some sort of compensation for that. So, but the questions in contract are these. Was there an indication by one person to another of their willingness to enter into a contract with that person on certain terms without further negotiation? Now that's come straight from the definition of offer that I had a few slides back. Was there an offer capable of acceptance on its terms? And if there was there an offer to contract Or was it just an advertisement or a puff? Anybody want to hazard a guess at what a puff is? I want to say Marcus?
I work for Mark.
You work like that. Been talking to your boss. Sorry, what's your name?
Mike.
Sorry?
Mike.
Mike. It's not that far off, do we think? I feel like I'm doing okay. Mike, tell me, what do you think?
There was a willingness to enter into a contract.
Who was willing to enter into a contract, objectively speaking?
Carbolic.
It's Smokeball. So they've shown their sincerity. It's showing a promise. So objectively, it looks like a promise. I think my question was around the corners because I was going to ask you what a puff was.
Sorry, puff is an absurd statement, something that can't possibly be believed by a reasonable person.
So a puff is an absurd statement. I always find that word hard to say.
Absurd.
Something that can't reasonably expected to be making any sense or be a real offer to a sensible person. Now, my favourite example of a puff is Red Bull gives you wings. You know, I just think if somebody sued because they didn't get wings after drinking Red Bull, like that's a puff. Also, I haven't seen them for a while. Those advertisements where, you know, teenage boys love this product where you spray this deodorant on and then just women come from nowhere and like mow you down. I don't know, my son, when he was like 14, he was just like, I just think he kept thinking it was not working and he just put more on. But you know, but I would think that was puff. Okay, yeah?
I've already seen a grey zone between the puff and the intention. So the intention was to deceive, basically, but they've put it in a way that, you know, someone would believe it. So to me, that's not puff.
So let's unpack it. Sorry, I'm
Sarah.
Sarah. Yeah. I was going to get there, I promise. So Sarah's making a really good statement here. First, she's noticing the grey zone. So I've misled you right at the very beginning that, you know, offer plus acceptance equals agreement. It's really easy peasy, don't worry too much about it. But actually, there are always the grey zones between the different kinds of conduct. So secondly, she's used this word intention. And the sentence was, tell me if I misquoted, they intended to mislead, but they've worded it in a particular way. That's what it looks like to us. That if they're saying at the end, and they did, we'll get to their arguments here, this is why I hate PowerPoint, because I'm thinking a straight line, but they're saying, well, this is a puff. We were just talking it up. Everybody knew that nobody would pay 100 quid. 100 quid, that's a lot of money. Somebody can Google quickly what 100 quid is worth in, you know, $18.93 today. It was a 10 shilling product, which is still a relatively expensive. I mean, we're talking about a time when people would be lucky to be earning £1 a week. You know, so if somebody can just do a real-time value of £100 in 1983, I'd be really interested. I should know that. But so we're talking about a lot of money. It's the equivalent of me saying, I'll give you $1 million I'll give you $1 million if you get a cold. So, I mean, it looks a bit ridiculous to us, but when you think about the size of the numbers, maybe that was something that they believed. But they used language that made it sound like they were endorsing their product.
Just objectively, the court was looking at it, it just gives so much strength that the product must really work, because otherwise they're going to have to pay me.
Can you remind me of your name? I may not know.
Daniel.
Daniel. No, we did meet yesterday, last week, so yes, Daniel. So Daniel's making the excellent point here that the way that it's worded, objectively, the court is going to look at it not so much as a puff, but as demonstrating that they've got so much trust in their product that they're prepared to put that money in the bank and to make that big point. Yes, Jay?
Just to kind of flesh out that concept of like a puffery, if you're so we're talking about it in terms of like absurd statements, so like incapability of being reasonably believed, like Red Bull gives you wings, whatever. Yeah. What about things like statements that aren't necessarily difficult to believe, but that are capable of proving like the best ball in town or something like that? Would that be puffery, or would that just be?
Back at this time, so sorry, let me just repeat. So there are statements that people make, like the best, the biggest, the cheapest, the fastest, but you can't necessarily objectively prove them, but you don't They might be true or they might not. Can you use them? Today, showing my age, the Competition and Consumer Act, and in particular the Australian Consumer Law, will stop you from doing that. So we have a legislative overview that basically says if you're going to say stuff about your product or your price, and sometimes they're quite specific rules and sometimes they're general rules. So we have the thou shalt not in trade or commerce do stuff that is misleading or deceptive or likely to be mislead or deceive people. Doesn't matter whether you intended to or not, just matters whether you meet that test. But then there's also specific rules. So for example, about pricing. So if you are going to advertise that you are cheaper than someone else, you in fact have to be cheaper than someone else. If you're going to advertise that you're going to sell something at a ridiculously low price, you actually have to have them in stock and have a sufficient number of them in stock. Otherwise, conditions might apply, for example. If you are going to offer everything in your shop 50% off except for iTunes cards and hosiery, you need to make it clear that there are exclusions and you need to do that in a way where it doesn't get missed. So again, these are the kinds of things where the legislation has responded to the common law. Probably gives you a hint that the common law doesn't deal with them particularly well. But that's where we're up to now. I saw a question or a movement over here.
I reckon they're pretty unlucky. Like, when you talk about the puffery, and going a bit further ahead, if you like, they're saying the sincerity was we deposited $1,000 in your bank account. That's only 10 people. So 10 people could reclaim money. And they're saying that the offer was made to the world. And so you would have had, what, 4 million people in the world, and we're only going to put enough funds for 10 people to accept it.
So they're saying that could work out as their puffery as well? Yeah.
Well, and that's where I think they're a bit stiff.
So, well, question two, if, you know, without getting ourselves too bogged down in it, the £1,000 is in insurance, really, isn't it? You know, we can fund the first 10. It's also saying, you know, we don't think there'll be more than 10. We don't even think there'll be 10. Huge amount of money at the time. But yeah, look, they didn't expect to lose, shall we say. So basically, they argued it wasn't an offer, it was an advertisement. At best, it was an advertisement. The words don't express a promise, and they didn't intend a promise. 1893, so these ideas haven't really fully formed. So they didn't intend a promise, so they don't think they should be held to a promise. They said the advertisement itself was a puff or a boast. It was a way of saying, we've got all this money, we put it in the bank, we think this is such a good product that we're prepared to pretend that we're going to do this. Next, they said, and this is one of the issues that we'll need to unpick, is that even if those things were untrue, and this is really good legal writing, by the way, because even if there was an offer, in order to make an agreement, the offer needs to be accepted. So firstly, we argue we didn't make an offer. But even if the court finds there was an offer, well, that offer wasn't accepted. And the reason it wasn't accepted is because the law says acceptance needs to be communicated. And we didn't hear a thing from her until she was claiming 100 quid. So we didn't know that she bought the Carbolic Smokeball. We didn't know that she was using it in accordance with rules. We didn't know we were at risk here. And then they also said that the advertisement itself was too vague or uncertain, and for example, it lacked certainty. It didn't say what the time limit was between using it and contracting the flu, how long this would go. It was just a puff. It just said what she had to do. Mrs. Carlill's legal team, on the other hand, said, well, no, sorry, this is an offer and it's an offer to the public. It's not a bilateral contract, this would be a unilateral contract. So this isn't, you didn't make an offer, we agree, you didn't make an offer to Mrs. Carlill specifically, you made an offer to the world. And maybe it's not even really the world, maybe it's people who receive London newspapers, who are in the London newspaper area. They argued as soon as she did what the advertisement said that she had to do, she had a contract. So she accepted the offer by her conduct. when she got the flu later on, she was entitled as a consequence to make a claim under the contract. So once the contract was made, they had an obligation if she got the flu to pay her money.
How did she prove that she used the product as per
You know, every year somebody asks me this question, and every year I say I have absolutely no idea, and I make a little mental note to find out, and I never have. How did she prove it? There would be evidence or you'll need to. Can somebody ask that in evidence? Is anybody doing evidence?
Didn't the judges say something like,
I'll read it actually.
Yeah, there's something in the case about keeping a journal, or she's written it down, whether or not she really did. But there'd be an evidence requirement in order to admit that anyway. It's kind of not relevant to what we're talking about, but yeah. Do you want to add something
I was just going to
Christy?
say, wasn't it so that the judges said that it was such a descriptive, kind of way of using it that they just assumed that people would? I don't know, it's somewhere in the...
Yeah, there's a little... I can't remember either where it actually fits in, but yeah, look, it was quite clear what she had to do, and it wasn't particularly onerous or difficult what she had to do. So anyway, they've accepted the evidence, but I don't know how she proved it. So, what did the court find? Firstly, this is some of the legal principles that this case is for. You can make an offer to the world. So this is a bit of new law at that point there. That offer to the world will ripen into a contract when someone comes forward and does the thing, performs the condition that the offer requires. So it's a unilateral offer, and on acceptance by conduct, it becomes a unilateral contract. Acceptance itself occurs by performing the condition, doing the thing that was required. And communication can come later. In fact, it might never come because she might never get sick. And the notification of acceptance can occur at the same time as performance is required. So she can notify at the time that that $100, 100 quid has to be paid. Think about it using our lost dog example. I put up an advertisement saying my dog is lost, £100 reward. You find my dog. I don't know you found my dog until you knock at my front door and claim the reward. It's all happening at that one time, is it? Unless my dog is sitting at my front door, which quite frankly my dog would do, but just if that was happening, I don't know until you've actually performed and my obligation arises. And there might be 50 other people out there looking for my dog at the same time. And I would be bound to any one of them who found the dog and brought it back to me. I don't know who's looking, I don't care who's looking. I just want my dog back, and my obligation arises at the time that the dog comes back to me. So now we'll keep coming back to Carlill, by the way. When in doubt, cite Carlill. It deals with a lot of these different principles, but to get to that point, I just wanted to start there. I have forgotten your name.
Ben.
Ben.
I was just thinking, did they consider the opening the floodgates to litigation type argument in the judgment? Like, was there a lot of claims that occurred as a result of that judgment?
Well, this did broaden the whole idea of contract law. So it broadened it out, and because I think too it gave, quite frankly, it gave tort law a nudge as well, because this isn't something that naturally fits in a contract environment, but this idea that a manufacturer has obligations, or manufacturer or distributor of a product has obligations to a range of people that they don't necessarily know that they're contracting with, really probably ultimately made more of a nudge in the tort area than it did in contract, but it's a pretty important principle for what we're dealing with. And the principles that come out of this case are, talk about the objectivity. It doesn't matter what Carbolic Smokeball intended. What mattered is what Mrs. Carlill read in the paper based on the words that were used and the information that she had available to her. In fact, it doesn't even really matter what she read and understood. What mattered is what a reasonable person in her circumstances would have read or understood in the time. The next principle is that acceptance can happen by conduct. You don't necessarily have to know who the parties of the contract are until the moment of formation. And the communication can happen at the time when you're trying to enforce the obligation.